Tired? Stressed out? Overworked?
I've had it! Enough already!
It doesn't have to be that way. Your host, Bob Roth, Executive Director of the David Lynch Foundation, has learned that you can thrive without tension in this fast-paced world. This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on Sirius XM Insight.
Welcome to Success Without Stress, and today's program is one of the ones I've been looking forward to a very long time. We're going to be focusing on women's health, and I have as two of my guests at the top of the hour, Claudia Mason, who is one of the world's top models. She's been featured on the covers of such magazines as Vogue, W, Mademoiselle, Elle, Cosmopolitan, and numerous foreign publications. She starred in prestigious fashion campaigns for Versace, Anne Klein, Fendi, and others. And she's also appeared in films, television, and theater, as well as a producer, as an actress. And she's coming out with her first book, Insider's Guide to Teen Modeling and Finding the Supermodel in You, which will be published by Skyhorse Publishing this November. And the reason why Claudia is here, in addition to being a wonderful friend, is she's a spokesperson for the American Heart Association and the American Stroke Association. And we're going to be hearing in just a few moments from Claudia and her story, her saga of the experience of having a stroke, unexpected, and how Transcendental meditation has helped to bring her back beyond normal to a healthier, more enlightened existence. And joining Claudia is another dear friend, Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum, who's an attending cardiologist and the director of the Women's Heart Health of Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City. Dr. Steinbaum is the author of Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum's Heart Book, Every Woman's Guide to a Heart-Healthy Life, where she teaches all women how to lead the healthiest lives by living from the heart and also lower your blood pressure naturally. I'll come back to more of this, but I really want to focus in because in this show, we're looking at the problems of stress, the epidemic of stress, and it's on a spectrum. From the everyday stresses that we all experience when we're just sort of trying to get to work and our kids and life, to the real traumas that a woman experiences who's been a survivor of violence and abuse, or a woman or a man who's in combat in harm's way, or a child growing up in a crime-ridden neighborhood where violence all around her or around him. And I've invited these two women to come and speak to us about stress and heart health and transcendental meditation. And I'd like to begin right away, Claudia, by you just telling us your story.
Yes. Hi, Bob. Lovely to be here with you and Suzanne. I, healthy young adult, didn't have any health problems, and I was in a dance class, which is what I have done for my whole life for exercise and happiness, a jazz class, and I was doing a typical jazz move, throwing my head around, which we see all the time, this move, and nothing happened in that moment that I knew of. Went home, uneventful night's sleep. The next morning on my way to an appointment, I had the worst headache of my entire life. I thought it was a migraine. Since I'd never had a migraine, I thought, well, this must be what a migraine is. And my visual field, so my vision was going in and out. And I just thought, did I eat enough this morning? I couldn't imagine. It was the weirdest thing. And it was scary, but I was just, again, I convinced this is going to pass at any moment.
Did you have a history of headaches?
Never had a migraine, never had a headache, completely healthy. Apart from having a curved spine, scoliosis, which is
and how old were you?
Manageable. In my 30s.
Okay.
And I mean, the last thing on my mind that it was anything serious. I just thought I, was having a weird headache because maybe I didn't eat enough food that morning. Went home. Someone helped me, this stranger, because my vision, again, was going in and out. I can't describe how it was the oddest thing. But I just was going with it in a weird way because I wasn't thinking anything was wrong. A kind stranger had taken me around the corner. We sat and we thought it would go away. We actually prayed in that moment. Both of us thought that was a good thing to do. Sounds very odd, all of this, but this is what happened. And went home, went to sleep. My vision had finally come back, but there was still a visual field deficit. And so the next morning I said, this is odd. This is not normal. What's going on? I should go to the emergency room.
Did you sleep all right that night?
Completely.
Wow.
So went home, went to sleep. This is what you should not do. I was, by the grace of God, I'm very lucky today. But again, I had no idea what was going on. So I woke up and the next morning I still had this deficit to my visual field. And so then I went to the ER finally. And after a CAT scan and MRI, Dr. Brockington, who was at St. Luke's Roosevelt, which is now Mount Sinai, I was under her care, had never met her before. She had informed me that I indeed had a stroke. And I'm laughing now at just the shock of, as I said on TV the other day, being interviewed by this. Here I am on radio, on TV saying I had a stroke. It's still shocking to me. She was convinced, and they realized it's a left vertebral arterial dissection, aka stroke. And in that moment in the dance class, when I was throwing my head around, that's when it had happened. But you should not do what I did. Just go home when you have odd symptoms. There's an acronym BFAST. They've added the B to it. So B is for balance, if your balance is off. E is for eyes, vision, which is what happened to me if that's off. F is for face drooping. A is for arms drooping. S is for speech off, right? And T is then time to call. So I didn't do any of that right away. I went home and went to sleep. So what happened? So then I'm in the hospital. I hear that I have this. I've just been told by a doctor. And it's just absolutely shocking. Again, it was just to the visual field, no cognitive or muscular fallout, thank God. And my visual field, there's still a little spot to the left that's missing, a little visual field deficit, but I am so, so lucky. So what an outrageously crazy thing to happen. I have no history of stroke. This is purely from an accident in a dance class.
And you didn't have a genetic propensity for it?
No genetic propensity, no history of stroke, completely healthy. It was literally from this move in a dance class. And since then I've learned that there's so many, people of all ages get strokes, and the ways that you can get it, you can even get, and this is not to put fear out, just to be aware of, in hair salons, which so many women go to, in the basins, they have to come up with different sinks when they wash their hair, because it's you can get it just from being in your neck in an odd position. So it's not about fear. It's about, going back to dance class, which I have. It's about being aware. It's knowing the signs. And I'm grateful today. I see it as a blessing, Bob, because it's made me be grateful, seriously, for what I have. Sure. And I have so much. And that it wasn't worse. And that I'm recovering every day still. The visual field, there's a little deficit, but it's been shrinking. It's amazing. It's made me aware of how important it is to not get stressed out about things. I had meditated years before, and a technique that I didn't like, and I had heard about TM for a long time, and it had always fascinated me, and I was so lucky to meet Britten Chroman, and suddenly knowing that was last year, that this is exactly what I want to do. Like, I need to meditate again. This was after I had the stroke. I'm like, I have to find a technique that works, and honestly, I just knew that I was going to love TM, and it's been amazing to have this as a big part of my healing process,
Your comment, Dr. Steinbaum?
I have so many.
I want to remind you that she's the attending cardiologist and the director of women's heart health at Lenox Hill Hospital in New York City. And Claudia, that's beautifully put, and thank you very much for sharing, and we're going to come back to you in a moment.
First of all, I have to say publicly that, Claudia, I really think you are a superhero for telling your story. I wish that more women would come forward, and you have a voice and a presence, and it is so important and respected that you're doing this. So thank you. I'm a spokesperson for Go Red for Women through the American Heart Association, and I will tell you, I've been traveling around the country talking to women, and they're so afraid to come out and speak. So you're so brave. I just need you to know that.
Thank you so much.
The next thing, and I'm like sitting here with my heart pounding, hearing your story and saying, listen, ladies, if you have any symptoms, you really have to go get help. Go to the hospital, go to the emergency room. There are some surveys that were done really looking at women calling 911 for different symptoms of heart attacks. Interestingly enough, women often present differently with heart issues than men. But when they were asked about whether or not they would call 911, they don't want to. And the reason is they don't want to be wrong. They think they're fine. But most women, about 79%, will call for somebody else. And your story of, I'm okay, I'm going to go to sleep, it'll be better, it'll pass. I think, just to have a stranger needing to help you should have been indication enough. But the real take home is time is important in getting any of these things checked and going to the emergency room and saying, listen, this is what's going on with me, no matter what your age or what your symptoms. You know your body. We all know our bodies better than anyone else. And if you think that there's something wrong, you got to go get help. I think that's a huge take home.
Yep.
And the next point is this isn't about fear. This is all about empowerment.
Yeah.
Because the more we know, the more that we have an awareness and an understanding of what our risks are and what health means, we're in control.
Yep.
It's when we don't know that
Yes.
becomes scary.
Yes.
And I think that you're bringing up a really interesting point, which is about this whole mechanical reason for stroke. It happens in young women. Young women are not immune to anything. And I kind of think we are. Although I'm not so young anymore and I don't think so anymore. But I think that when we're
She's young.
Yes.
Okay, I am.
Yes, of course.
No. But I think, women in their 20s and 30s, there's a real sense that we're fine. And there's some truth to it. We all have tons of estrogen at that point, which is really protective. But that doesn't make us immune to this stuff. And one of the things that we've learned, by the way, I have to mention, the first stroke guidelines for women just came out for the first time in 2014. That's last year. So we never had stroke guidelines before then. In 2011, the prevention guidelines for women and heart disease came out. So when we're talking about women's heart health, cardiovascular health, this is from 2011. This is like yesterday in medical land.
Yeah. The education information is not out there, which is partly why I'm also a spokesperson for the American Stroke Association, American Heart Association, because I want to help get the word out, exactly what Dr. Suzanne is saying. How did I not know? An intelligent, educated, worldly person or anyone not know the
So
science.
how have you grown or changed from this? You said that you're a different person. I'm curious.
I'm not indestructible. Like Dr. Suzanne was saying, you tend to think that when you're younger. It's just really unbelievable. Things can happen. To be grateful for what I have. How have I changed? To be more aware, to want to help others, which I was that person before. I wasn't an egomaniacal, horrible person at all. But just
awareness. I think that's
awareness.
the word, right?
Yeah.
On every level.
Awareness and helping to heal, or helping to spread words. Awareness, education.
Now, transcendental meditation. You, Dr. Suzanne, talk about it a lot. You're a very vocal exponent. I'd like to hear from you the science, and then I want to go back to Claudia about your experience and how transcendental meditation has helped you, not just with your heart health, but just in life.
When we talk about heart disease, when we talk about prevention, let me say this, 80 to 90% of the time, cardiovascular disease is preventable. Clearly not in Claudia's case, but when we look at the overall picture, it's due to lifestyle issues. And those are things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, smoking, sedentary lifestyle, and stress. Now that piece, that stress piece, is something that we didn't really recognize as much as we should have till fairly recently. And stress, the overwhelming effects of stress with inflammatory markers and stress hormones, that fight or flight syndrome, that leads to coronary artery disease or plaque in the arteries, and that leads to heart attacks and strokes. Over the years, we haven't had an understanding of how to manage cholesterol and how to manage blood pressure and diabetes and all these other things. But how do you manage stress? I can tell you how to eat, I can tell you how to exercise, but there's never been that one thing for me to say, I can give you a prescription to manage your stress. So I keep talking about these guidelines. So in 2011, we had these women and heart disease guidelines. In 2013, the American Heart Association released a scientific statement that talked about transcendental meditation. And it was the only meditative technique recommended in clinical practice to reduce blood pressure. And was recommended for people, anyone who had a blood pressure over 120/80, which is our norm. And at that time, I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. Why is that? Well, there's been about 350 studies to come out, about $28 million, I believe, in funding about transcendental meditation. And one of the most compelling studies showed a 48% reduction in cardiovascular disease with the use of regular TM. Now, as a cardiologist, I want you to know that that is more effective than any medication I can give. So let's get back to what we started talking about, which is stress. Stress is the underlying issue that leads to most of these heart conditions, leads to cardiovascular disease and many other illnesses. So now that we can say, here is this modality That's been proven, that there's research, that there's a scientific statement, and the data is so compelling. Now I have a prescription. And now I can say, here is something I can give you that you can do that can manage your stress. And studies have shown there's a decrease in norepinephrine and epinephrine and cortisol and all of those stress hormones. That is so powerful, so unbelievable. And that's why I'm so outspoken about it, because finally I get to say, here's what you can do. I can give you a prescription. And I can send them to you, Bob.
Send them to TM centers all over the world. Now, I want to just do a quick definition of what transcendental meditation is. And I want to go back to your comment where you had tried one other form of meditation, because the word meditation is a generic term. It's like saying, I exercise, or I eat food,
Right.
or I take medicine.
Right.
It doesn't mean anything, really. But science has basically identified 3 different types of meditation. One is called focused attention, and that's a concentration. And sometimes people who take yoga classes, they do it at the end. They're trying to clear their mind of thoughts. It's like the analogy of waves on the ocean, and you're trying to stop waves, a very difficult thing to do. The second is called a mindfulness form of meditation, open monitoring, and that's more like just observing the rise and fall of waves. It's a coping tool. In the middle of the day when things are getting intense, you push back from your desk for a moment and you just observe your breath. And the third is what we're talking about, transcendental meditation, self-transcending. And in the analogy of an ocean where you have waves on the surface, in transcendental meditation, we don't try and stop the waves on the surface, thoughts. We don't try and clear the mind of thoughts. We're not just watching our thoughts like watching waves. We're actually, like an ocean has a silent depth, we're actually accessing a level of the mind that every one of us has. Whether we believe it or not, it's irrelevant. It's like you don't have to believe in your nose. Nose is part of your face. That silent level of the mind is there, and transcendental meditation gives access to that effortlessly. A 10-year-old child can do it. And when that happens, when the mind settles down, the body gets deep rest, and that's where all the healing takes place and rejuvenation that Dr. Suzanne was talking about. That said, tell me a little bit now, Claudia, about your experiences with other forms of meditation and what you felt, why you felt this practice of TM suited you better.
I don't know if I want to say, because I don't want to put it down. It just
No,
didn't
we're not
work
putting
for me,
anything
but
down.
it's
They
a
have different
popular one.
outcomes.
Exactly.
They just have different outcomes.
It just didn't.
This is the lovely thing about Claudia. She doesn't want to put anybody down, and we don't want to.
No, of
We're talking
course.
about different outcomes. That's all.
Exactly, because different strokes for different folks. In a
Don't say
sense.
strokes.
Oh, right, cancel. Right, different ways. Okay, but that form of technique just wasn't working for me. It was an hour requirement in one sitting. It was different. It just didn't. It didn't work. So I thought, well, meditation. There's so many other great forms. I will find one day. I was super young when I got them. Maybe it was the wrong time in life. Although, as you said, kids meditate and are great. I then years later heard about TM, or had heard about it along the way, and was interested, very interested, but it just, I guess, wasn't the right time. And then finally it was. Last year, in the span of a week, about 3 different people, including Britten, who I'd met, had just, there's that phrase again, TM. And so I thought, I just knew, I had a feeling this was for me. I didn't really know much more about it, but I knew that I had a feeling it would work. And I then got TM through DLF, as you know.
The David Lynch Foundation.
The David Lynch Foundation.
You can also learn, I should say to listeners, through Transcendental Meditation Centers all over the country.
All over the country.
Yeah, go ahead.
And immediately, working with the wonderful Linda Mainquist at the David Lynch Foundation, who gave me the technique, it was just like, this makes me happy today. I just knew, thank you, universe, for this is the perfect time. And it was just so right for me. I loved the ritual. Anyway, going into too much. I don't know what to say here.
No, you're not. No,
Bob.
it's beautiful. I have another question for you.
Okay.
One thing that I find is interesting about, at least my experience with TM, is that you can start for any reason. You could start for high blood pressure. You could start for memory. But a whole constellation of changes take place from the deepest core of your being out to the most surface. If you look back over the year of meditating, how's Claudia more the same or grown or different than before you learned to meditate?
So there's some level, and I've heard you say this before, of where you don't, things get to me. I'm an emotional person, most of us are, I guess. But I have that to go back to if I can grasp at it in moments of being very upset, let's say, of just that it doesn't have to get that big. Resilience, yeah. And that wonderful feeling that I have when I'm meditating, I can call upon throughout the rest of the day.
Beautiful.
not always easy. I'm saying this is the ideal situation, but it's happened in the last year.
Do you look forward to meditating?
Absolutely, especially that morning, the morning
You do.
one.
It's done
just,
20 minutes
Yeah.
once in the morning before the day begins and again in the afternoon.
In the afternoon. I love the first one. As soon as I wake up, I go right into meditating, and it's so awesome. It rocks, Bob. Rock. But it does. It just feels great. And what a great way to set up the day. And then the afternoon one is very helpful too, and it can re-energize and refocus. And so it definitely has helped me. And I believe I just want to say again, briefly though, that my stroke, again, has nothing to do with heart, completely healthy. It was a freak accident, which
What were some of the
happens.
consequences could have happened?
Could have happened that
for
didn't?
you that didn't.
Well, from a freak accident, any part, you can have cognitive and muscular disabilities and fallout. I mean, that's what did not happen to me, thank God. But it was
like paralysis or memory.
Paralysis.
Speech.
Exactly.
So you just
Weakness.
lucked.
Yeah.
Totally. Now realize that it did affect my visual field, but I mean,
What does that
I
mean,
can't even
affect your
say.
visual field?
Well, my vision was going in and out. I mean, if you can just imagine, suddenly you're not able to really see.
So you're talking
that's
to someone
horrifying.
and then it gets fuzzy?
Yeah, fuzzy. There were colors, rainbow colors, and I've read
goodness.
since then that is exactly what stroke is, of course, unbeknownst
And does
to
that
me
go
at
along
time.
with the feeling of feeling nauseous or uneasy, or you're just fine and you just can't see?
You're fine and you just can't see, and the vision is blurred in that moment. And it was a trip. It was just, and I was so convinced because, again, a healthy person, perfect heart, no history of this. I didn't think that anything was really wrong with me. I'm so lucky that, and then, it cleared up with this partial deficit. But TM, I also was very attracted to. I would have been attracted to if this hadn't happened to me, this episode of having a stroke. But I also know that I wanted it at that time because I believe that it's going to help heal the remaining visual field deficit that is still off to my left side of my visual field. So it's like a little spot.
So right now when
which is
you're
shrinking.
looking, there's like something you...
Little bit that's missing. Yeah, there's a little bit that's still missing. But, I embrace it. And there's a reason that this happened. I don't know why. But if nothing else, than to make me to maybe... Although I wasn't a highly stressed person. So again, you can't explain accidents. I don't think the doctor can either. I think we're all human and some things are just going to happen. I don't really know why.
And how we respond to the things that happen.
How you
is the
respond
key.
and what do you learn exactly, how you respond. So I'm just taking this as a blessing and to remember that, don't sweat the small stuff, all of these phrases we've heard throughout our life, and just to be so grateful for what I have, to stay healthy. I've always had a good diet and exercise, but I'm more cognizant of not having too much sugar, not having as much alcohol, although I'm not saying medically that that's going to make a difference or not. I believe
No, but it's a
that,
change.
just being smart that way. But I don't believe I'll ever have one again. We never know what life brings us, but I don't fall under the belief system, oh my God, I've had one and now I'm going to have another. I don't believe in fear. I believe in having faith, moving forward. And how do I keep my faith? Well, you have to have some kind of spiritual practice. And I was raised that way. So this is, my mother did different forms of meditation. Unfortunately, never TM. I wish she had, but so you have to ground yourself somehow, and that's what TM has helped me so much.
Suzanne, weigh in. Here.
I
Thank
think
you, Claudia. I really appreciate you just being so open and transparent with your experiences.
I think Claudia brings up a couple of issues because oftentimes when someone undergoes something very traumatic, it's life-altering, and it's almost a fork in the road. At times like this is when you'll hear people say, all of a sudden now I realized what's important, what matters. It is that moment that you get to decide the rest of your life. And what I always say to my patients, to people is, do that before you get there. Why don't you appreciate every single solitary minute of your life before something happens that you have to stop and pause and do it? When it comes to women, it's really interesting because most women today are really juggling so much. They're really oftentimes the center of their own personal universe, taking care of so many people, whether it's juggling work, family, kids, home. I think women are natural caretakers, and because of that, they're out there. They're putting themselves out there and taking care of a lot of people. And when we look at the effects of stress on women, women tend to have worse physical effects and emotional effects. So they tend to be more anxious. They tend to have more sleep difficulties. They tend to be more nervous, more depressed. Now, believe it or not, all of these things are not just things. These things lead to an increase in inflammation, stress hormones, and heart disease and illness. We can all live with these things, but I am going to tell you right now, at some point, it's going to catch up with you. You're going to get sick, and you're going to have that wake up moment of, now what am I going to do with the rest of my life? So when I think about TM, for Claudia, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you had that moment of saying, how am I going to live the rest of my life?
Yes, for sure.
And I want every woman to think that every single day.
Yeah.
So you're actually living a different quality of life now than you did before that happened.
I think so. Yes. I still, when I get upset about silly little things, I get upset at myself. Like, really?
Doesn't matter.
What did I go through?
Yeah.
But I don't think about that right away. I'm like, come on, I don't want any other messages. Like, I heard
got
ya.
the message.
I heard you.
I'm all ears here.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, Dr. Suzanne, we were talking before the show about what led you to learn Transcendental meditation and to be an advocate the way you're speaking. Was it a natural progression in your life?
I really was thinking back at the time that I learned, and I think that there was this moment of all of these pieces coming together. I'm a cardiologist. I run the Women and Heart Health Division at Lenox Hill Hospital. I was going through a divorce. I'm a single mom. I have an 8-year-old son now, and
Who's wonderful.
Who's awesome. And I had the guidelines come out from the American Heart Association. So here it's, wow, this TM stuff, it works. It's scientifically proven. And I'm a single mom going through a divorce, and let me try this myself. And let me just also say this, as a person, I never prescribe anything. I never tell other people to do anything unless I do it myself. So when we were talking about the effects of yoga on heart health years ago, I learned to do yoga. And I went and did that and felt like I needed to always do things before I could ever recommend it for anyone. So I really decided that I would do this, and I would give myself about 3 months of a twice-a-day practice to really decide whether or not I liked it. And I will never forget, gosh, it must have been a week. I say 3 weeks, but when I think about it, and it couldn't have even been that long. All of a sudden, one day, I just woke up and I was like, oh my, I think I feel better. And, feel better in terms of what? Anyone who has had a breakup, let alone a divorce, you know how stressful and horrible that could be. And all of a sudden, it was better for me, which I thought was really interesting, because as the scientist going through let me figure it out and see if I could recommend it for others, it wasn't about others for a moment. It really became about me. And so why am I outspoken about it? It goes back to what I was saying before. We all need to manage this stress. The stress in our lives today is unbelievable. And I think it's specifically more overwhelming for women and physically more overwhelming. And I know personally, and I know through my patients, that it's beyond important to figure out a way to manage that stress. And you don't just get that through exercise. You don't just get that through that time out of breathing. That TM, having a practice, which is what TM is, and a regular routine structure, that becomes part of your makeup, even when you're not doing it. So all of a sudden, this is what I noticed. Instead of reacting to everything emotionally, because I'm like that too, Claudia, instead of reacting, responding, all of a sudden, it was like the clock slowed down, and I could respond intelligently. I could respond thoughtfully. I didn't have to just react. And that, believe it or not, changed everything. Yeah. And so it's not about doing this TM all day long and breathing and meditating. That's not what it is. It's this thing that affects you throughout the day and changes sort of the circuit you're functioning on. I just want to say, if anyone is listening and they want to find out more information about Transcendental Meditation, you can go to www.tm.org. It's a nonprofit educational organization. I one or two more quick questions for Claudia, and then we're going to segue to hear from our other guests about work that's being done to bring Transcendental Meditation to women and children who are victims of
violence and abuse. Supermodel, actress, producer, author. People don't know the supermodel is a stressful world, is it not?
Yes, that's great.
It's not. It's not.
It's awesome that you asked that, Bob. A phrase.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Look, it's not, not coal mining and other, there are a lot of other professions, and it's not as hard as that for sure. But it is stressful because when you think of taking young, mostly women, because the field is dominated by girls as opposed to boys. It's the one profession I believe that the girls make more than the boys, but women make more than men. But you're taking a very young person. In early teens, often I was discovered by a scout at 13, and you're going into a world where it's a business world. It's the business world where most of us go into after college, right? So you're not ready to deal with a lot of this stuff. How can you be at 13, 14, 15? So that alone sets it up to be stressful. It's a great question. I'm thinking how best to answer it. And then, and I mean, that's at the core because you're a very young person dealing with a lot of adults, expected to be an adult. And you're overly sexualized a lot of the times when you're before you're 16, and so that is very stressful for women. And then when you're an adult in the industry, and it's great. And I'm not trying to make it. It's a great question, Bob. Never kind of answered it in this way, and I appreciate you asking. Although I write a lot about this in the book, but I had time to think about it and form my thoughts. But I just wanted to say that then, as the adult, and when you're able to deal with it, which is mostly in your 20s and 30s and all that, it's demanding. You're on planes all the time. I mean, other professions have that too, but it's a lot of there's very little glam in entertainment industry. The few minutes that we see of any performer, and models are performers, the end product is woo. Like Beyonce on stage or the NBA finals. But then you think of all the stuff that goes into it. And models are similar to athletes. It's a career that happens when you're very young. It's usually like athletes, 4.5 to 5 years it lasts. So you got to cram in. You want to make as much money as you can. You want to get the connections so you can go off into another industry. So there's a lot of pressure. And models are under that, like athletes are. People don't often think about that, but they're very similar industries.
And you must address this I want to let everybody know, in November, you can get Claudia Mason's book, Insider's Guide to Teen Modeling and Finding the Supermodel in You, which is going to be published by Skyhorse Publishing. Dr. Suzanne, you wanted to comment?
I think that one thing that, if I may just dovetail, that I say to all of my patients to pass along to their children is that we all need to have a really solid foundation to fly.
Yes.
And how do you find your solid foundation?
Yeah.
And I actually believe, Bob, that TM helps you find that solid foundation.
Amen, if I may say. I'm like, woo, I got goosebumps.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So I think, I really am looking forward to teaching my son, having my son learn, because I think that foundation is critical. And I think no matter what field you go into, and I can't imagine the pressure of your field, no matter what, we all need to be grounded, right?
And this is a perfect transition to the next topic that we want to discuss, which is providing that grounding, that foundation for women and girls who have been victims of, the worst travesty, which is violence and abuse, not just here in America, but in Congo and Uganda and Cambodia, where the David Lynch Foundation has been providing programs with Transcendental meditation to this at-risk population. I want to thank from the bottom of my heart, Claudia Mason, just absolutely a beautiful soul from the core of your being and what you're doing and bringing this this issue out to the forefront about strokes and making the distinction that you don't have to have high blood pressure. You could just be exercising. You could just be a jazz move and just like that, and knowing what those symptoms are, what to look for.
Thank you.
And really grateful. And I'm going to ask Dr. Suzanne to stay for just a moment, but I'm going to take a break here. This is Bob Roth, Success Without Stress, and we're going to have two new guests joining us and talk about the use of Transcendental meditation with at-risk populations. Thank you again very, very much.
Thank you
And I'm
so
going to
much,
let
Bob.
Suzanne say some final wonderful comments about Claudia, because she's obviously moved by you, Claudia.
I'm very moved by Claudia. I was about to turn around and say, Claudia, we have to work more together because there's a lot of really important messages here. I think that this is really a time that, as we're seeing, women are really on the front stage of making a lot of statements. You know, it's been a hard road for many of us for many different reasons. And I think that saying that is okay today. It might not have been okay, maybe even 10 years ago.
True. Yeah.
And I think that there is a sisterhood
Yes.
that we need to sort of embrace, of understanding there's a commonality to our trajectory, to our lives. And that commonality is something that I think is so important for us to share. And Bob, thank you so much for including me in this today, because I want this message to get out to women that we need to figure out how to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
And thank you.
Thank you, Bob,
Okay.
so much. And Dr.
And we'll be right
Steinbaum.
back.
This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth on SiriusXM Insight.
Welcome back. This is Success Without Stress with Bob Roth, and we are continuing our discussion on Success Without Stress on women's health. And my two new guests are Britten Chroman, who is the director of the David Lynch Foundation's Women's Initiative and also an international trustee of the Transcendental Meditation Program for Women and Girls. Prior to funding the Women's Initiative at the David Lynch Foundation, Britten worked in a leadership role in the International Transcendental Meditation Organization, specializing in developing and administering programs for women and girls around the world. Based on her long-time research and experience practicing TM, Britten realized that TM could be an effective tool to help women and children overcome suffering from violence and abuse and heal the debilitating effects of trauma and rebuild their lives. And Britten's dear friend and colleague is Tish Lara, who's the Associate Director of Women's Initiatives for the David Lynch Foundation. Tish develops curriculum, coordinates courses, tracks student progress, and ensures successful survey administration and data collection. Tish has over 10 years of experience working with children and families with medical conditions, such as neurodevelopmental disabilities, along with adolescents in the juvenile justice system. Tish holds a BA in social welfare from the University of California at Berkeley and a master's in social work from the University of Southern California. Tish received her clinical training at the University Center for Excellence in Developmental Disabilities at Children's Hospital in Los Angeles. Why Transcendental Meditation? Now, we understand the David Lynch Foundation was founded initially to bring this meditation technique to children, inner city school kids who have problems learning and managing stress and substance abuse issues. And it's helping them a lot. Why women? Why women?
Well, so I think it was so inspiring to hear Dr. Suzanne and Claudia talk about their experiences. And Dr. Suzanne was talking about how women deal with so many stresses and really kind of take on caring for people and how those daily stresses sort of build up in your life and how TM can kind of eliminate and relieve those stresses. So there is an astounding amount of violence and abuse happening to women in the world. 1 in 4 women will be a victim of violence and abuse in her life. So that's just globally an astonishing and horrific number. So what happens you add the daily stress of whatever we're going through, divorce, taking care of children, all of that, and then you add in being a victim of violence and that traumatic stress. And that traumatic stress compounds the stress that we're all going through. So TM is such a simple, effective tool to help relieve that traumatic stress and let these women kind of rebuild their lives. And I think we heard a lot in the last session about being grounded and resiliency. And I think that's what TM gives.
And Tish, what is your experience? You said you're tracking student progress and data collection. Tell me what your experience is.
Yeah, well, I think before I go into that, I think it's really important to note that statistic, the 1 in 4 women, it's actually, according most recently, according to the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence, 1 in 3 women in the United States and 1 in 4 men will experience physical violence at some time in their lifetime, at some point in their lifetime. And I think it's really important to note that is highly underreported. So those numbers, as astonishing as they are, it's actually
1 in 3
much
women,
greater.
and that's underreported.
It's underreported, yes. So, this is...
Is that physical
an
abuse
epidemic.
or emotional, just abuse?
Well, domestic violence is, it encompasses physical abuse, emotional, economic,
I see.
spiritual. It's a very complex and common issue nationally and worldwide. So, the women that we see, they have, high incidences of depression, sleeplessness, hypervigilance, symptoms of PTSD, and stress. So coming to, one of our programs, we have the honor of bringing Transcendental meditation at both internationally and domestic programs. And one of our oldest programs, the Women's Initiative, is relatively new. We started in 2012. And one of our oldest programs is at the New York City Family Justice Centers. And there, these women are coming, in a time of crisis, and they have to navigate all of these resources. So they have to navigate housing and legal and, public assistance and mental health services, case management. And we're able to go in and provide them with this technique that allows them to center and to come back to themselves and to navigate all of those resources and to actually, access those services available to them in a way that, many of them weren't able to do before TM. What we see is that they're feeling calmer. There was a 31% reduction in perceived stress, 63% increase in overall well-being at the New York City Family Justice Centers. It's been really wonderful.
It's an interesting thing I've heard this comment that you think of meditation as some sort of a luxury. We're here in New York City, for the Upper East Siders, for the people who have the wealth, and then they can go to their yoga class, and then they go to the spa, and then they do their meditation. And now to be seeing, at least with Transcendental meditation, how it's not just for the Upper East Siders. What is your comment on that?
Right. I think it's interesting because domestic violence is something that crosses all borders, and so is Transcendental meditation. And it's been amazing to see these different women. We teach in Spanish, and there are a lot of Hispanic women who are very religious, and they've taken to it in an amazing way. And, these women aren't women who would walk into a yoga class and have those resources available to them. So someone from a foundation came to one of our programs, and she's like, it's amazing the diversity of the women that you're serving and that they've taken to this so well and that they're really enjoying it and feeling the benefits from it.
Why do you, both of you, comment on this? Why do you think that women seem to be at least more receptive to Transcendental meditation? I speak as I'm a teacher of TM, and I've often made the comment, if I talk to an audience of 50 men and women, 25 men, 25 women, and I give the same talk, and the women they're all say they're CEOs of companies. Mm-hmm. At the end, I'll say, who's interested in learning to meditate? And of the 25 women, 26 women will raise their hand. Every woman, and of the men, it'll be like 4 or 5, they don't want to raise their hand. They don't want... Why this sort of receptivity? Speaking, you don't have to speak for men, but just speaking with women.
I don't know. I think a lot of the women that we see through our programs, it's actually really hard for them to do this, to take care of themselves, and so I've kind of found the opposite. Mm-hmm. But it's really. It's been interesting because, they are so dedicated to their families and to, their children and to their pets and to everyone else and taking care of everyone else. Mm-hmm. And we kind of see them at a point where, they're like, I can't do anything more for anyone unless I take care of myself first. So it's kind of like put the mask, when you see put the mask on yourself before you can, put it on your child or, your loved one. And
that's the airplane.
Yeah, the airplane.
When the plane is going down.
When the plane is going down.
Put the oxygen.
But I think they're like, I need the oxygen mask. So they're kind of, I think maybe women are more in tuned with that, where we're kind of like, okay, like I'm feeling this, something's got to give. And that's just with, myself and also the women that we see. But, once they actually do come to us and they're ready and they're open, it is amazing how quickly, they just fall in love with the technique.
I want Suzanne, who's over there, to know, just a second, Suzanne, we're going to give you final word on this whole thing, okay?
Yes.
We have a few more questions.
I would love that answer.
We're going to have a few more questions, and then I want Suzanne to comment. What's your vision? Now I'm talking to Britten. You're overseeing the women's programs. What's your vision for bringing transcendental meditation to at-risk? Where do you want to be in?
There is such a huge need, and there's a couple things. I think we want to be international. We want to partner with big organizations who are doing work, with refugees and work with women who've been raped because of war. So partnering with these organizations who have a large reach, and TM is one of the services that they offer. And I think we also want TM to be seen as something like therapy, which is an accepted modality for healing in any of the organizations who are helping women in all these different things, and that the government subsidizes it, because I think that's, it's really necessary that this is available. And, we have a certain capacity to raise funds for that, but it needs to be on a big level. It needs to be anyone who wants to can go in and say, I've heard this technique works. I want to learn, and it's available for them.
Mm-hmm.
Final comments, Tish?
Yeah, I just wanted to share a story. One of our clients, who is an absolute superstar, was in shelters. She's transitioning. She had to move to different states, and it was really difficult. She was not able to stay in her community because it wasn't safe. The perpetrator was still there. He was not, following the court order to
stay away.
Yes, to stay away. And she was at a really difficult time. She had to be separated from her dog, who was, basically her child, and she was really struggling. And she kept coming back and, very dedicated to the meditation, but she wasn't feeling herself, because, like I said, she's a superstar, and she wasn't really feeling, like she had control, like she had control over her universe, like she was able to control her emotions, and it was too much. It was a lot for her to handle, and so we fell out of touch for a month or two because she was traveling, and I just saw her for the first time yesterday, and it was amazing. She has her dog back. She has a new apartment, and she told me, and I may just cry just thinking about this, but she told me that it wouldn't have been possible without TM. That TM allowed her to take care of herself and to, like I said, navigate all of those resources. She said before she would get so stressed out, and she didn't want to go back to public assistance. She didn't want to go back to the housing, to her housing case manager. And she said that the meditation allowed her to be patient, with herself, and to be patient with others and the process, and to really take care of not just her, mental well-being, but her spiritual well-being. And, it was amazing. And she, back to the resilience piece that we were speaking about earlier, she said that, things don't bother her as much. That although, she's not a robot, she's like, I'm not a meditation robot, but that, things, yes, they are upsetting and they upset her, but she doesn't walk around with them all day. And so she's really able to grow and to thrive. And that to me is just, it's an honor. It's an honor to be doing this work. And I'm just hoping that more people will see, the incredible value that TM has on, not just, victims of violence and abuse, but just all women's lives.
And Britten, thank you. If they want to the listener wants to find out more about your women's initiative, how do they?
So they should visit the David Lynch Foundation website, davidlynchfoundation.org. And our email information is on there, and you should reach out because we're looking for more programs to partner with, and we're looking for funding to bring these programs to more women. And I think Tish really hit the nail on the head when she said thriving. We really want, our goal is for women to thrive and to give them the tools to do that.
And before we conclude, I want to ask Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum to give her final remarks.
When we talk about men and women, I think women have an understanding of the concept of prevention, of really doing something or having a tool that helps them. They're giving so much out. Women in general are multitasking and juggling so much. There is an awareness from women that they need another tool to help them juggle everything. Men are interesting. They wait to that wake-up call. They wait to the end. They wait for that event to happen. And then they say, I need help. And what we need to help men understand is that they can also have a tool that they can use, that they don't have to get to the end of their rope. They don't have to get to that heart attack or that stroke or the high blood pressure. Because trust me, in my office, they get there. And when they get there, they say, I wish I did something. I wish I had something. And I will tell all women and all men, there is something that you can do. The most amazing thing, and I really want the listeners to understand this because we've all seen it, the David Lynch Foundation has done such amazing work in this field of women victims of domestic violence and men victims of PTSD. And the benefits, seeing these people in real life, it's just extraordinary. And to be able to be a part of this is so special for me because here is, again, a tool that I get to say I have seen it from people who need it the most to people who are benefiting from it because it's helping them deal with life so they don't get sick. And for me, health is about wellness. It's about prevention. It's about thriving. It's about vitality. It's not about illness. And we all have to change our minds and our perspective so we can figure out what we need in our lives to live that way. And I think that's where, in my mind, transcendental meditation fits in.
Dr. Suzanne Steinbaum, thank you for your absolutely eloquent and insightful comments from a medical perspective and a perspective of an enlightened woman, and Claudia Mason and Tish, Lara, and Britten Chroman. Fabulous show, very satisfying. I hope every woman and every man in the country listens to this. This is Success Without Stress. I'm Bob Roth. Thank you for listening.